call the meeting of the Design Adjustment Committee to order. Before we get started, I need to read a brief introduction. The Design Adjustment Committee's purpose is to establish clear and measurable review criteria for the consideration of major deviations from the city's Technical Standards and Specifications Manual. The Design Adjustment Committee does not consider housing type, cost of the proposed unit, occupants, building material, unit size, number of bedrooms, or the architectural design of the structures. These hearings are quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings. That means it's like a court hearing, and the committee's decisions are constrained by the standards in the ordinance and based upon the facts presented. All variance requests require 4/5 vote of the committee to grant the variance. Appeals of committee decisions are to the Superior Court. The parties of these cases are entitled to an impartial board. If a board member has a fixed opinion on the matter, a financial interest in the outcome, a close relationship with an affected person, or has had any ex parte communication about the matter, please disclose that information to determine if a recusal is necessary. City staff will introduce the proposed project to the committee, and committee members may ask questions. The applicant may present additional information about the project, and the members may ask questions. If anyone wishes to provide evidence at today's hearing, witnesses must sign in on the clipboard in the back of the room and be sworn in. Because witnesses are to provide sworn testimony, please focus on the facts and the standards, not personal preference or opinion. When a witness comes forward to give testimony, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and speak clearly. At this time, staff will administer oath for all individuals who intend to provide witness testimony.
If I can have staff and applicants and any members of the public who wish to speak to please stand up and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from July 19th. Has everyone had a chance to review those minutes? Are there any comments or discussion?
Chairman, I've got one correction on that on page 2, the third paragraph on that page. It says Ms. Smith said that the applicant requested relief from the minimum driveway offset. I think that information just needs to be stricken from it. It doesn't represent what was discussed. The chart immediately following describes what was discussed. So
The whole paragraph, or just to like property line? So Ms. Smith said the applicant has requested relief from the minimum driveway offset from the adjacent property line. Just strike that one sentence?
I think so.
Okay.
However,
That's been noted,
Okay.
and adjustments will be made. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll make a motion to approve the minutes with the adjustment that Dennis mentioned.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved as adjusted. First item is the item number 1. Is there a staff presentation?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This site includes 4 parcels totaling 7.7 acres, currently zoned R15. The applicant is requesting the site be rezoned to an MD17 conditional district for our 225-unit multiple dwelling residential development. The applicant proposes to construct a new residential collector street off Carolina Beach Road that would provide access to the project, and this street would stub to the eastern property line to allow a future road connection to the Barclay West development. The applicant proposes to construct a private drive within the project that would end at the southern property line to allow for a future road connection from this location to the south if and when that site redevelops. The new street is proposed as a 50-foot residential collector street with a 24-foot drive aisle, vertical curb, on-street parking, and sidewalk along the south side of the right-of-way. The technical standards include a standard street cross-section for residential collector streets. The applicant proposes a non-standard cross-section, and a waiver is required. The standards stipulate a maximum length of a cul-de-sac street be no more than 500 feet. The applicant proposes a cul-de-sac street that exceeds this maximum length by approximately 1,032 feet Any waiver is required. And then finally, the text standards stipulate the maximum length of a private drive be no more than 500 feet, and the applicant proposes a private drive in excess of 500 feet, and a waiver is required. And I do have the table that's included in your staff report for reference if you have questions about the specifics of those requests. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and the applicant is prepared to make a presentation as well.
I did have one question. If the road that is being proposed is stubbed for a future connection, is it really considered a cul-de-sac street?
Until that connection is made, it is a cul-de-sac street.
Okay. Okay.
I think in other situations where this has come up, there's been maybe a temporary turnaround put in place or some kind of easement that allows for the turnaround to occur for fire apparatus and emergency response vehicles, knowing that eventually that connection will be made. So it's a little different than your standard cul-de-sac.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
The only question I've got, Brian, I see on the item number 1, it says a proposed 5-foot sidewalk on one side, but in their documents that they presented, I saw a 6-foot sidewalk. Is there, you know, if there's clarification?
I'd have to review the, if I made a mistake here, I'd have to review the documents to see, and the applicant can clarify what that is.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
We can go through this later, but I had 2 questions. One regarding the minimum parking. I'm seeing on their site plan that they've got, oh, come on, sorry. 342 as a minimum, is that correct? Is that a minimum by code?
They have a minimum standard, but they're also using a 15% reduction based on proximity to a transit stop, so I believe the 342 is the new minimum.
Okay, that's the adjusted minimum, and they're providing
Yes.
348. Okay.
And I had a question about parking too, Brian, and it's more of information for me, but what is tuck under garage parking?
They would be exactly that, the spaces underneath the first floor of the structure, or the second floor of the structure in some locations, kind of like a garage without, it would be like an open garage kind of port area.
Okay,
And again, the applicant probably has a better explanation than I do on that one.
all right, thank you.
Okay, I had, any other questions for Brian? I'm sure there will be more later. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Does the applicant wish to provide a presentation?
Good afternoon. My name is Allison Ingebretson. I am a landscape architect and land planner with Paramount Engineering, 122 Cinema Drive, here today to talk to you about the Willows. So I believe everyone's probably familiar with the site location, but just a broad overview, the cross streets that you see here are Independence Boulevard and Carolina Beach Road. The area in yellow is the 4 parcels comprising our site. And it is located directly across the street from the new Harris Teeter Shopping Center, across Carolina Beach Road from that, and is an infill between that development and the future expansion of the Point at Barclay development to the right. This is a closer view of that. There is a storage facility directly to the north, which is the piece that you see built out on the upper portion of the screen. This is our proposed overall site plan. I believe based on some of the questions, you've already reviewed that. Let me get a little closer here. There are a few things about this site in particular that bring us to a design adjustment committee today. There are some specimen trees on site, which we have worked to save on the site. They are these 3 trees in green. And working with that, we don't want to put too much paving around them. We don't want to put buildings on top of them, so it causes us to pull parking and buildings away from the root systems on those trees. And as further point to bring us here today. We have an approved TIA for the project, which indicates where our entrance needs to be on the site. And it is up in the top left of the screen. It is a right-in, right-out only, and it will have a tapered right-in turn lane there. There's a secondary point of access for fire and EMS only, and that is the hatched area that you see below apartment building A. As Brian mentioned, this is a 225-unit apartment complex. It's 4 stories. We do have a parking reduction proposed for a transit stop. And there are a few other things about the site. We've got some requirements from the city to provide a multi-use path across the front at Carolina Beach Road. So some of those things come into play in siting the buildings and the parking on site. Furthermore, we've worked with staff on how to provide the best meaningful connections to future projects, namely that Road A, which we are proposing as a 50-foot private right-of-way at the top of the screen, and then Private Drive C will connect to the southern property. While that is currently a single-family home, in the future it could develop into something more, so this will provide that connection. There are wetlands in the back bottom right of the site, which provide a nice buffer, but also prevent us from doing too much in the way of paving or building back there. We do have a great site for infiltration, so you will notice there's not a stormwater pond on this site. We propose all underground retention and infiltration on the site, which is indicated by those dashed lines across Road A and then in the rear parking lot behind Building C. So that brings us to needing to ask for 3 variances. The first of which is a combined variance request for a non-standard road cross-section on Road A. We propose a 50-foot private right-of-way instead of 60-foot, which would be a standard with the city. This allows us to fit our utilities and some landscaping in along that drive and an additional buffer, which isn't required but will just enhance the project. So that is the reason for the width there. I should note that everything that we propose to you on this section is a conservative number. We may be able to widen our right-of-way, we may be able to widen our sidewalks when we get through engineering, but because we're not at that point, we picked the most conservative worst-case scenario to ask for, so we don't have to come back to you again. So let me walk through this cross-section in broad detail, and then if you have additional questions, I'm happy to answer them. We do propose a 24-foot wide road drive aisle that will be accessible for all vehicles. It will also be a private right-of-way, so it will be available to public use should someone want to connect to it from the adjacent development in the future. And there won't be any messy cross-access easements or anything like that. It'll just be open for public use. So the angled parking off of that is something that is similar to what you would see in the adjacent development, the Point development. It is a standard 60-degree angle parking space, and it is using the existing technical standards for 60-degree parking to inform that design. The next length of cul-de-sac variance is really about the property dimensions itself. The 4 parcels are roughly 100 feet in frontage on Carolina Beach Road and about 872 to 875 feet deep. So by nature of the property itself, when we combine those 4 parcels, we only have 400 feet of frontage on Carolina Beach Road, but the property is more than twice as deep. It makes it very difficult for us to make good use of the property without, making a longer than 500-foot road from Carolina Beach Road. So to make that connection to the rear property, we are asking for this 872-foot road to be allowed. And just a reminder that that's connecting in and will go around that stormwater pond and connect into some roads that are already there. The last of our requests is the what we affectionately call the 500-800 rule, and I know you all know it well, so I won't go through the details of it. But essentially, to get to any of the farthest parking spaces on the site, we are beyond the 500 feet we are allowed to travel from the through street, which is Carolina Beach Road in this instance. And one of the reasons that we are an extra 696 feet longer in the longest run of that is because we are pushing the buildings and parking back to save those trees in the front and also accommodate some of the other requirements that we have with the city. So with that, I have members of our entire development team here ready to answer any questions you should have, but I will turn it back to you.
Any questions?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, go ahead, Carl.
Just a question for the applicant. Road A seems to terminate at some sort of triangular-shaped parcel. Can you speak to
Yes.
that and ownership of that?
Yes, sir, I can. So the area that you see there with the triangle in the back, the city's GIS parcel shows something that goes to that far line. When our surveyors got in there and started looking at deeds and things, there's an overlap. So there is land that might belong to the point over there. Our clients are not contesting that. They're being more conservative in making sure their project works on the smaller piece of land. So that results in a strange triangle.
But the intent is to stub that, not create a little spite strip that
Correct.
nobody's afraid or feels okay.
Correct. If in the future some agreement was worked out and their property line really does end at the far side of that triangle, they would stub out to the far side.
Okay.
And I had a question about, you had mentioned the traffic impact analysis specified where the driveway had to be placed?
It specified that it needed to have a certain turn lane dimension, which then informs where the driveway actually needs to be. Because we only have that 400 feet of frontage, we're very tight.
Gotcha.
Can you clarify the question that was asked initially? Is a 6-foot sidewalk or a 5-foot sidewalk proposed on the southern
It's
side?
6 foot minimum, that's correct.
Okay.
If I can, Allison, was the intention to stub the sidewalk as well to the property line to the east?
Yes, it is.
I don't think that was picked up on the plan. I just wanted to point that out.
Ah, okay, yes, we will absolutely make that clear.
And can you explain why you are not able to extend? I mean, I see a gap between the edge of the right-of-way and the property line. Why can the right-of-way not extend to that? Or am I looking at that wrong? There seems to be a gap between I guess it's the northern property line and the edge of the right-of-way.
Against the storage facility
Yes.
that's built. Yes, we have some grade that we will need to tie down in that location, so leaving enough room to do that, as well as to provide a visual landscape buffer. While not required, we think that it's nice to separate the storage use from the residential use we're proposing, so that is our intention there. It also is meant to direct people back inward in the project and not to the fence. They can't go over into the storage facility, so there's no purpose in having the sidewalk on that side.
Okay. And another question is, if we assume, I guess I could do the math, but if we assume that Road A is a through street, does the project meet the 5.8? Does the remainder of the project meet 5.8 if we assume that that's a through street?
The connector point on Private Drive C, which let me flip back to an easier to see plan. All right, Private Drive C there that connects to the Plan South here. That would be greater than 500 feet from that Private Drive A going through, but really only because we're providing the stub.
Okay.
And we probably would still have the far parking space would probably have to be adjusted to come into compliance there.
Okay, and then to clarify another question that was asked earlier, that tuck-in parking, is that under building A and C? Is that,
Yes, that's correct, and it is a air-conditioned corridor parking. It's a vented structure, so it's not a traditional like roll-up garage door kind of thing, but it's got just an area that you drive in, you park underneath, and it's got vents for air circulation, and then the corridor itself is air-conditioned. So it's meant to be a bit of a upgraded amenity for folks instead of a traditional garage or surface parking.
interesting.
And I do have the developers here if you want more information on that.
Can you speak a little bit to the proposed rezoning? Because a lot of this has to do with site constraints and, you know, I can see you're really tight against the minimum parking. I mean, I can appreciate providing adequate parking, but we're kind of in a chicken or the egg situation with, you know, if, you know, there could be a bona fide site constraint for this many units, but if it's not rezoned, then you don't need the site constraint. So I guess I'm trying to figure out what is the by right use on this property, or what are you asking for above and beyond?
Okay, so the existing site is R15 right now, so it certainly wouldn't be a multifamily project that comes through if it does not get rezoned. The site, as it is currently going through, is MD17 would be the rezoning request. We did get a unanimous approval through Planning Commission. We're going toward council, provided that this goes well today. And then once that's achieved, of course, the 225 units that's on the plan would be the maximum amount allowed, unless we went back through a conditional rezoning. Now, one of the things that you might see in the documentation is that the TIA was done for a previous developer, and they proposed additional units. These folks have worked, this developer has worked with the city to find a careful balance between the site constraints, what makes the project work, what allows them to do workforce housing, which is 10% of the units, and everything to make the project compliant with all the technical codes. Now, that said, the TIA recommended or approved additional units. These folks do not want to do that. They are capping themselves at 225.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I got a question about the adjustment number one, the 50-foot right-of-way.
Okay.
You know, in reading through the justification, it seems like I read somewhere that while it's a 50-foot right-of-way, there will be 5 feet of one of the parking lines on one side of the right-of-way and 5 feet of the parking outside the right-of-way on the other side. And I'm just curious as to why you wouldn't just do a 60-foot right-of-way and put all of the parking within the right-of-way.
Right. It is a legitimate question. I know it looks a little strange. It's something that we often do when we're on tight sites like this with grading and utilities that we have to fit in everywhere. It gives us a flexibility not to have to fully engineer the design at this point and give you some assurance of the minimum that we will do. So that's why it looks a little strange. Very likely we have the ability to widen out that right-of-way and at least meet that intent, but we didn't want to come back should we not be able to do that.
We would be allowing down to a 50-foot right-of-way? Is that what we would be?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
They come back with a 55. I think that would be acceptable if we approve the 50.
That's the intent, yes.
I'm still a little confused on the grading side of it. You know, if you're going to be grading for the parking, how does a 50-foot right-of-way, how is the grading any different for a 60-foot right-of-way if you're physically building the same structure?
Oh, I see your question. Okay, so what we are trying to do is fit a lot in that little bit that's adjacent to the storage there. So we've got landscape that we want to put in. We potentially have a utility that might need to run on that side, whether it be telephone or something like that, something that's not otherwise shown on the plan. And then, of course, we have the underground infiltration here. One of the things that we've talked about in our office is access to that underground infiltration and having that access at the edge of right-of-way instead of in right-of-way. So this allows us the ability to access that outside edge of those storm retention areas. I don't have true details on that yet, but that was the reason for where we have it laid out.
So using that example, supposing there was a problem that needed to be inspected, you would have to close a portion of that parking in order to work in that area. Is that how you're envisioning that?
Yes, I think it's like any street that you would have anything underground. You'd have to work out how and when you do that. But certainly, if something needed to be worked on under there, we would have to close off the street or reroute traffic or something.
And still on design adjustment 1, I'm struggling to understand why the sidewalk has to be positioned against the back of curb. I read through that you're trying to provide extra landscaping closer to the building, but, you know, based on the image that we're looking at here, it looks feasible to not have it against the back of curb.
There is certainly room. We were thinking it was maximum benefit to group the landscaping together instead of having a little 5-foot strip where we could put a tree and then a 3-foot strip where we could put shrubs. We can do a nicer landscape together if we can flip-flop where the sidewalk and the parking go. So really it's an aesthetic ask on that one.
And I guess my concern would be vehicle overhang over a sidewalk that's at the back of curb.
Excellent point. Let me go to this cross-section. Something that I wasn't exactly sure how to capture in the cross-section is, since we have angled parking, this is 20 feet in depth in our actual parking space. If you look at the cross-section, you're going to see something that says 17.5. That's because we're doing an actual cross-section across there, not going at the angle of the space, which is the full 20 feet. So as you well know, the city's requirement is to have, if you have a wheel stop condition or an overhang condition where you have a sidewalk adjacent, you need 3 feet for that overhang to occur. But because of it being angled parking, there is not a scenario where you have the nose of a car inside the sidewalk like you might have with head-on parking. So we believe that we have it designed in a way that we've avoided those pedestrian car conflicts here and still met the intent of everything the city's trying to do.
You'll have wheel stops to prevent overhang, that's what you're saying.
I'm
You're
sorry?
going to use the wheel stops to prevent the overhang onto the sidewalk.
Yes, exactly. Wheel stops will be provided on the sidewalk side, yes.
Will there be wheel stops on both sides?
We don't have wheel stops shown in our section on the other side, but should it be required during the technical review, we certainly will provide them, or if it's a condition today.
Okay. Any other, go ahead, I'm sorry. No,
sorry.
please, please.
The other thing I was going to say, we do have a vertical curb on that outside edge that would prevent someone from immediately running into the adjacent landscape and fence.
And just so my eyes aren't failing me, I think I see wheel stops on the head-end parking, is
Yes.
that correct? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to make sure. And is that sidewalk along Private Drive C on the back of curb or not?
It is on back of curb, yes, it is.
Okay.
We also understand going through technical review committee, we'll work through exactly the dimensions of what that needs to be. Again, asking for worst case scenario here.
Understood. Okay. Any other questions right now? Okay, I can't I can almost guarantee you we will have more questions later, but we do have to open the public hearing, and thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, at this time, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Before we get into the discussion, the same question I always ask Brian, 3 waivers and preliminary plan approval? Okay. All right. How do y'all want to try and tackle these?
Mr. Chair, just for the record, would you accept staff's report and as well as the materials presented by the applicant into the record?
Of course, yes.
And to add on to that, there is one correction in your staff report. I believe there's a reference to the length beyond 500 feet as being 1,032 feet, and as you've seen on the exhibit provided by the applicant, the maximum length beyond that is 696. Just want to point that out.
Okay. I'll have to hunt where that is, but okay. Noted. Okay, well, I mean, we have 3 variances. We got the 5.8, we got the maximum length of a cul-de-sac, and then the non-standard cross-section. I think probably for me, the one that warrants the most debate is the non-standard 50-foot cross-section. If it's okay with you, I'd like to tackle the 5.8 first. I personally like the circulation here of the drive aisles. I think the looped connections, how they've managed to save the specimen trees. They've got 3 access points back to Road A. They got stubbed connections to the Barclay tract and then to the south. You know, I personally don't have any issues with the 5.8. We can, you know, potentially the non-standard, but what about the 5.8? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I have the same thought, you know, providing not a dead-end street. There's circulation that's available
Right.
to
I mean,
anybody that enters. Yeah.
there's no dead ends, which is maybe even impressive. So I'm going to make a motion to approve waiver number 3. I think that's 3. For the variance from the 5.8, 500, 800, based upon the future connectivity and looped internal connectivity provided by the project, and you know, especially considering that they were able to save the 3 specimen trees. So that's my motion.
I'll second.
Any other discussion on that one? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Waiver number 3 carries.
I had a question for our attorney. Road A is being proposed as a private right-of-way. Can't foresee the future, but say that Stubb Street does connect into the point at Barclay, and that's a public right-of-way. How would that interact? How can a public right-of-way stub up to a private right-of-way?
We certainly have examples of that in the city where, for example, council's accepted a portion of a right-of-way, but it stops at a certain point. So there are examples of that. The concern would be is without, you know, specific conditions that would state that it would be open to the traveling public. For example, there could be a barrier or gate or some along those lines, which sometimes are allowed, you know, on private streets. Would it be open to the public? So that would be a potential concern.
And I might just add that there are conditions included in the conditional district rezoning request that speak to that, just to make sure those remain open for public use. Oh, and that's, again, as the applicant spoke, there's already been the planning commission, and those conditions were included as part of that recommended approval.
And do those conditions deal with, obviously, the connectivity in public use, but no unobstructed access to, I mean,
They speak directly to remaining open for connectivity and access.
okay. Okay. Any thoughts on either of the two remaining waivers? I guess we'll,
Say with that information regarding adjustment number 2, the length of the cul-de-sac exceeding, I would make a motion to approve item number 2 based on the fact that it's being constructed as a potential through street in the future that would provide additional connectivity to that area.
I will second that. Any other discussion on waiver number 2? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, that's waiver number 2. And then on to number 1, which is the non-standard cross-section. I know that the adjoining property to the north has been developed as a storage unit. So there's not like, the user to the north would probably not use a sidewalk. But I don't know, I'm struggling to see that, if you've got residents that are parking over there, and this is meant as a street, potentially a through street, is a sidewalk on that side necessary? Because you're essentially saying that those residents that park there, and I got a question about that too, but the ones that park there, they're just going to walk right across the drive aisle. Most other places that I've seen angle parking, everywhere that I can think of, but I'm sure there's examples, but there's something there on the other side, a business, a home, something. And I don't know, I understand the parking is necessary, and a right-of-way lengthways across a parcel of this shape is a big ask, but I'm just wondering if, those however many spaces that are on that side, if we're, properly serving those residents.
And with the fence there too, on that adjacent property, I mean, you cannot go that direction. I agree, anybody that parks in those parking spots are going to be residents of the facility and drive and walk across Road A. Yeah.
And until the connectivity happens, the only way to access those spaces, I mean, there's nobody coming from the north yet. So somebody's going to loop wrong way into those angled spaces, or they're going to back across the opposite direction into those spaces. I mean, they're kind of an awkward configuration until that connection is made. And even, I guess they work more, it's more functional when the connection occurs, but I don't know. It's really unusual.
Say, I understand the parking. I mean, there's a lot of units. I don't want to say a lot. The parking resembles the number of units that they're building. But I have concern with future potential connectivity, this being used as a networked street and the angle parking. Without the angle parking, the parking numbers are going to plummet. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I don't think it would be a good service to the residents. But maybe that has to do with the number of units and the number of parking required. But
Right. That's kind of my thing, is it's like the number of units are triggering the need for the parking and the need for the waivers. It's like a chicken or the egg. I don't know, would some sort of pedestrian crossing, would there be a benefit to some sort of a pedestrian crossing in that area? I mean, if there's no sidewalk on the other side,
That was going to be my concern, Rob, you know, looking forward, is that parcel to the east of the developed, that someone's walking on the north side of a, you know, hypothetical sidewalk there, and they're coming towards Carolina Beach Road, they're going to have to make 2 crossings potentially if they wanted to get to the multi-use path and then go north.
right, without a crosswalk,
Right.
potentially. Yeah.
Got a question. Once that connectivity to the north, and we got traffic going this way, if I'm the driver of my vehicle and I'm parked, if I need to get to the passenger side, now I'm requiring them to walk into the roadway to get to the other side versus the front of the car. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, if we load up that as a landscaping strip especially, you know, I mean, if it's grassed, you might say somebody might still walk there, but if we load it up, I would feel more comfortable if there was a sidewalk over there, personally. I mean, I don't know if there are any, you know, open space concerns with why the 50-foot right-of-way is being proposed versus the 60. I can sort of maybe appreciate, you know, that, you know, so I would be fine if some of that was, I don't know if easement's necessary on a private right-of-way. This is kind of new to me. But I would be fine if that sidewalk were outside the right-of-way in some form of an easement. I don't know. I can appreciate the bulbed out tree wells as a traffic calming measure. I can appreciate that.
I think with some properly placed bulb outs, that could encourage a pedestrian crossing across Road A also, if they were directly across from Road C and Road, what is that, B? If the bulb outs were aligned, those tree wells were aligned a little better.
Okay. I don't think I have any problem with the sort of southern half of that section detail, you know, with the 6-foot sidewalk being directly adjacent to curb. I feel like that's pretty typical, especially if they have the wheel stops to prevent the overhang. Any concerns there?
I think with the street trees, you know, that they're providing in the wells, kind of, those are going to be more substantial than what they could plant in a 4-foot plaza, or I guess 8-foot plaza's required, but yeah, I don't have any concerns with the wheel stops, providing the wheel stops at least.
I don't know the logic behind locating all of or the majority of the stormwater within Road A right-of-way, but I'm assuming there's some engineering basis for it. I do hope that an adequately sized tree can be placed in there and it's not limited by the infrastructure that's going to be sort of surrounding it. I'm assuming that we can, I mean, that's not necessarily, it's kind of non-standard, but we can work that out in the TRC, I guess. Just would hope that they can still get a decent-sized mature tree in there. I know that, you know, water and sewer utilities sometimes can limit the types of trees, but hopefully they can work in some decent trees around the stormwater infrastructure that's proposed.
Well, and I think the developers or the engineers done a good job keeping the utilities, you know, underneath the pavement in the roadway. To some extent, having the right-of-way 60 feet will provide more space for utilities to be working, but I could also see the counter-argument that this being potentially a future through street, that having it as a 50-foot provides some calming features, you know, for people coming off Carolina Beach Road, go to points of Barclay, provide some calming features at the same time, so.
Okay.
I don't have too much of a problem with the 50-foot, but I think your points about the sidewalk, I think, are more pressing.
It's kind of where I'm at too. Okay, well, we need to take some action on it. I mean, there's a lot of different elements to this. It sounds like the overall pavement width, parking configuration, maybe even the 50-foot right-of-way are all appropriate, but I'm hearing concerns with the sidewalk on the north side and potentially pedestrian crossing. Because, I mean, I can see, I think the biggest point to me is that if we allow the sidewalk on the north side to be waived, we're now providing an incentive for that connecting road to also have their sidewalk waived, because they wouldn't connect to anything. And if we've got a public potential multi-use path along Carolina Beach Road, I do feel like we have to provide that connectivity. So I just don't know that I can support the lack of a sidewalk. Okay, well, that's my motion. I'm going to make a motion that we, is it a conditional approval? I guess. Conditionally approve the non-standard cross-section for residential collector street. But I would like for there to be the, mirrored 6-foot sidewalk or sidewalk on the north side of some configuration to be worked out by TRC, as well as some pedestrian connectivity. How would you? We need some sort of pedestrian connectivity from the north to the south to connect those residents up with the apartments.
You have to provide connectivity in the vicinity of Private Drive B and Private Drive C, I think would be good
Okay.
direction.
All right. So the conditions, I guess, would be that they would be required to provide sidewalk along the north side of Road A and pedestrian connectivity in the vicinity of Private Drive B and C.
Mr. Chair, just for clarity, when we say pedestrian connectivity, we're speaking to pedestrian crosswalks, potentially aligning islands to provide that connection. I just want to make sure that we're giving proper direction to the applicant.
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, we can work out the technical details at TRC. I mean, I don't know whether some sort of raised crosswalk would be appropriate or whether an at grade, but the TRC can work out the details of that pedestrian connectivity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Similar to what's shown across Road C and across Road B, I guess is how I would interpret that.
Right. So I think I worked through a motion there with conditions, but I don't think it's had any other seconds or anything yet.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Right. I just think it makes sense when the connectivity to the Barclay, we're going to require them to have sidewalks, and it's going to stop here. So I think, like you said, continue that all the way through.
Captain Benfield, can you speak into your microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just agreeing with Rob about when Barclay gets developed and that connectivity comes, we're going to require them to have a sidewalk. So I think we should continue that, require that sidewalk also on this lot too. I just pretty much agreeing with them.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion is conditionally granted. So that brings us to the preliminary plan approval. There are some recommended conditions listed by staff on page 4 of the staff report that would be potentially tied to any approval. Any discussion about the preliminary plan? Obviously, we would have to condition that approval to add in with the, they'll have to show that sidewalk and pedestrian connectivity. That was just required. I will make the motion to approve the preliminary plan with the conditions noted in the previous variance and recommended conditions by staff.
Second.
Second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, so item number 2.
Chairman Gordon, I need to swear in Ms. Smith as she'll be giving the presentation for the next item.
Okay.
So Ms. Smith, if you could stand, raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Case DAC 4823 pertains to approximately 1.96 acres located at 3715 Carolina Beach Road. The site is currently zoned Commercial Services Conditional District and is developed as an auto repair and service land use. Existing impervious is approximately 12,250 square feet. The applicant is proposing to modify the current conditional district to expand land use options and plans to establish a new parking lot and additional structures in the rear of the site, adding approximately 48,950 square feet of impervious coverage. Land Development Code Section 18344 requires parking facilities to meet ingress and egress requirements prescribed by the city's Technical Standards and Specifications Manual. The Technical Standards and Specification Manual specifies that the length of a private driveway shall not exceed 500 linear feet. The applicant is proposing a maximum driveway length of 710 feet due to physical site constraints. Therefore, a waiver of 210 feet is requested. That concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I will request that the case summary be added into the record, and the applicant is present as well to answer any additional questions.
Any questions for Nicole? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Cindy Wolf, and I'm working with the owners of Kennedy's Automotive through this process. As Nicole pointed out, and as you can see here, the existing lot is extremely impacted by the physical constraints of its size, which is just the 120-foot wide and 750-foot deep. The layout provides, as she showed you, for getting back towards the back of the site, but we still have a 50-foot buffer yard on the back based upon what's behind it. We have shown the turnaround back there that's cross-hatched to the standard for the emergency vehicle, and we have stubbed to the side the vacant lot that is to the southeast, as is required for just about all development these days as far as cross-access between commercial projects. We believe that all of those things are reasonable and justify the request for the extra 700 or 210-foot length. And we would continue to meet the intent of the code for protection and safety with the turnaround. It would not increase congestion in any way because it is the subject drive and it would be all concentrated in here. And it would not be contrary to the public interest or materially danger the overall public. These improvements still continue to meet those emergency standards. I'd be happy to answer questions.
I do have one question. So the existing building up front is automotive repair. I assume the 3 bays that were beyond that is just an expansion of that existing business?
That's correct. For the rezoning, yes, we're expanding that building, and then we want the ability to add value and add uses to the rear of the site. It's an underutilized site, obviously.
But we don't know what the uses of those 2 buildings in the rear are going to be yet? More
Part
kind
of
of
the
like flex space type thing?
Yeah, part of the rezoning is a list of uses, but generally we're showing flex space. Of course, the CS district allows quite a few different types of commercial uses for that. And then the back, we're just showing pretty much as a warehouse, but very specifically for RV and boats trailer storage. Interior.
RV and trailer storage interior, you said?
Yes. I'm sorry. Here.
So the RVs
Yeah, the
and
back
trailers
building just, 9 bay or 8
Oh, so somebody
eight
would
garage
just
doors.
store their RV inside
Exactly.
those? Okay, I see what you're saying. All right. Because obviously storage exterior, there's not a lot of room back there, and I was just.
No, it's not intended really for that. It's, you know, it's tough in a situation like this. He doesn't have specific uses, but in a CS district, there's a variety of uses. It would not involve any outdoor storage of materials, you know, so there's certain things as part of the rezoning that we're conditioning away, but we basically want to show a building to the back, and so that T-head with the extra length driveway was a necessity.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
Thank
Thank you. Again, I'm sure we'll call you back up. I have a question. It's for maybe staff, maybe legal, I'm not sure. We see a lot of, you know, these drive aisles that are quote-unquote stubbed for future interconnectivity. Like, is that enforceable? Like, if an adjacent business comes in and they want to connect to that stub and the two property owners don't like each other, can we enforce that as a connection point due to this?
Our current cross-access requirements, if a code requirement is enforceable.
What do you mean if it's a code requirement?
Well, last night, the city council just approved an amendment that kind of altered those connections, so they're only applicable on, you know, frontage roads, which Carolina Beach Road is, but there's additional standards for how those are implemented and the requirement for adjacent owners to allow for the connectivity in the future. It's part of those provisions.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, we have to open the public hearing. I don't know that there's anybody here, but I will open the public hearing. If there's anybody from the public who wishes to speak. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. In reading the staff report, one variance, one preliminary plan. Is that correct? Because there are recommended conditions. I don't know, do we tie it to the variance if they're?
There is no preliminary plan. This is just for the waiver.
All right, so we don't.
So if those are inadvertently included, we apologize for that, but it's not necessary to approve a preliminary plan for this.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on the waiver. I mean, go ahead.
Based on the shape of the lot, I mean, in order to get to the back, it's impossible, or the back half of the property goes unused forever, you know.
I mean, they don't have, I agree that there is a site constraint, a bona fide site constraint here that limits their, you know, ability to connect to either the rear or the side. They're providing that future connect. Whoa. I'm sorry, maybe I didn't do my homework. What's to the north?
It's an RV center.
Okay, so it's developed already. Okay, there wouldn't be any need for a future connectivity there. The one to the south is has a potential for, okay, I see the point there.
Storage. RV storage.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I guess I have some concern, you know, with that turnaround remaining open and available. I mean, we all know what, you know, auto repair places can be. I mean, they sort of throw cars wherever they can find space. And without knowing what those rear uses are, I don't know. Maybe they can, would it make sense to stripe it or sign it to make sure that it is maintained as a turnaround space, and they don't park cars right up against the property line or something? I mean, is that, I'm trying to.
Are you talking about the hammerhead part?
I'm talking about the hammerhead right at the end,
Well,
yeah.
the hammerhead will be, and TRC will address that, it's going to have to be a designated emergency vehicle turnaround only.
Okay.
So they're not going to be able to park things.
So the TRC may end up, or would have the ability to require striping or signage or whatever is necessary to ensure that that remains open and available for emergency
Because
vehicles.
it's designated for emergency vehicles only. No
Okay.
parking, no nothing.
Okay,
That was going to be my biggest concern, was that, but they've addressed it here on the plans, and of course, it's going to go further. And also, we could also utilize the parking pads here between the two buildings if we had multiple vehicles that went all the way down to Hammerhead to turn around, they could also back into there and leave the property also.
and they're short enough to where that turnaround is not going to, doing just a three-point turn is not going to be a problem in those.
Correct.
With that configuration.
Yeah, my biggest concern would be on that Hammerhead right now, is it designed adequate enough? But again, that's technical review, we'll address that when they go through there.
Okay. Any other thoughts, concerns? If not, I think, do I have a motion?
Actually, I had a question. I see on the plans that buildings are not intended to have sprinkler systems. I was just, it just
No,
caught my
well, no,
eye.
they will, actually. We've
Okay.
talked at TRC. It's all about when the buildings are built, they buy, because of the size of the buildings, there isn't an automatic sprinkler system situation. But the distance from it, we're going to have to bring a fire hydrant back up in there. That's a given. So there's versatility here, let's put it that way.
It caught my eye. And while you're up here, I see the parking for one electric vehicle.
Yeah, those are in the code now, so I've got to show it somewhere.
Okay, gotcha. I didn't see it shown, but,
So you're-
No, not on this plan,
Okay,
but certainly on
somewhere,
the major plan.
Gotcha.
This was just an exhibit for the waiver.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't have more, but I know that Nicole did have the site plan as part of her packet. And as we pointed out, the turnaround, that is the 60-foot and the 20 and the 20-foot radii, and certainly, I assume something like a striping, certainly signage, but striping would be easy in that. In addition to that, you can see where the striped area that I do have, that T-head, is beyond the facade of the back building. So there's even more space back there. But on the off chance that there was a car in front of the garage door while they went inside, we still have the T-turnaround totally vacant.
So there's only going to be 4 parking spots back there for the back building?
Yeah, there's really not a lot of reason. It's sort of a combination. Those 4 spots are really for the middle building, I would guess, flex space overflow.
Employee parking and stuff like that?
Exactly.
And you said the buildings are going to be both sprinkled and you're adding a fire hydrant?
We'll have to add a fire hydrant because of the distance from the building back the site. As to whether they're sprinklered or not, I'm not even going to surmise. That'll be up to the architect and the fire department.
Okay, understood.
sidetracked.
Thank you.
Based on the size of the building and what it's going to be used for.
Okay.
We'll determine if it's a sprinkler building or not.
I did have a question about fire access, though. I just saw my note. Supposing that new building in the back of the lot, there was something going on the back side of that. How would that be addressed?
That will be addressed again through TRC, because
Okay.
it's required to have within 150 feet of the fire truck,
Okay.
access to the hose and stuff like that.
What is the side setback? Is that 5 feet? I can't read that.
There's 0 technically.
Skinny fireman. Okay.
Sorry, technically, the setbacks are 0 feet, but I never do a building unless it's at least 4 because of maintenance of the wall and that exact thing.
Can't build it.
So these buildings are at least 4 feet off the side property lines.
Okay, so they would be able to get around back if they needed
Yes.
to. Okay, cool. Any other discussion? If not, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion
To-
to approve waiver number 1 based on the topography of the site and site constraints.
I'll second that and add the future stub to future connectivity as a, and I guess the hammerhead will get worked out in TRC because that is something we want to make sure that it remains clear. So I'll second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That's it. I guess we're meeting's adjourned. Thank you.